Well, in life, we always have a lot of challenges, sometimes traumas, sometimes painful experiences. In the world, there is suffering. That's what happens. We know what the bumper stickers say. And so there's always going to be a challenge and something that can disturb our peace. I like what the Buddha said 600 years BC when he says, even in those in suffering, be in joy, or be at peace even in the midst of conflict. And what he was saying is not giving some kind of admonition about how you should be, but what he was saying is the way we can be. And I think the same thing was true in 600 years later. Another master came along, Jesus of Nazareth, and he said, in the world you'll have tribulation, but be of good cheer, I've overcome the world. And what he really means is there's another way of looking at things, there's another way of thinking that can bring cheer. We can have joy. Our whole joy is really the purpose of all of our spiritual and psychological practice, is to be at peace and to have joy. And if we don't do that, we are really suffering. So what is it that brings that other side? Because there are two voices in our heads that every culture has identified. They've always called it by different names. Here we might call it the egoic voice versus the voice of truth, or the voice of insight, or awareness, or your higher consciousness, or God, or whatever term you want to use. And those voices are always there. And the one that disturbs our peace is usually the one that speaks first and the one that speaks loudest. And that's the one we listen to most of the time. It's part of those 74,000 thoughts we think every day. And most of those are repeated day after day. And if we're thinking thoughts out of our old traumas and old negative beliefs, we rehearse those over and over again. Then we attract that over and over again into our lives. So our biggest job, I think, as human beings, is to come to realize that we have that voice that wants our misery, or literally our death and destruction, like Sigmund Freud recognized 100 years ago what he called the death wish, or thanatos. And then there's that part of it, but it's that same voice inside that wants our misery all the way there to the death. And every solution that gives us to problems creates more of the problem. And so we'll have solutions in our mind, like if someone should lose their wallet and all their identification in there, and they start being worried about what's going to happen in their lives. Well, one thing we know is that what we focus on, we're going to attract more of. If I focus on worrying about an outcome, I'm going to attract more of a negative outcome. So my biggest job is to come to recognize that that ego voice wants me to worry, thinking it's going to help, when actually all it's going to do is create more of a problem. And so I need to start mind training with myself, much like we train a horse gently to come back to move in the direction we want the horse to go. We have to do that with the wild horses of our minds too, or we'll be in misery all of our lives. We'll produce depression, anxiety, physical illnesses all over the place, unless we come to train those wild horses in our minds. And if we do that and come to recognize that every voice in our minds that takes away our peace and our joy is not the voice of truth. It's not the voice of a friend. It's not the voice of God. It's not the voice of the higher consciousness. It's the voice of that egoic mind that just wants us to suffer. And any of its solutions it's offering is not going to bring a positive solution. It's just going to create more of the problem. And so one of our first steps, I think, is to begin to identify that voice for what it is, so that we don't have to keep listening to it. And we can know that if I quiet down that mind using some practice like diaphragmatic breathing, using meditation of some form, using some kind of chanting, or using some kind of energy psychology where you tap or touch on acupressure points, or you can use the thymus gland. Take your hand and rub it around the thymus gland and say, I deeply love and accept myself, even though I'm thinking all these worry thoughts or these fear thoughts. All of those are ways of coming to control our minds and stop that negative downward spiraling of those thoughts, which takes us into more despair, more hopelessness, and takes away our joy in life. Because following that voice never leads us anywhere good.